Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for the Making Progress channel. Today's topic is Beyond the Universal Basic Income, Solutions, or at least potential ones, to AI unemployment. And this is the Preparing for the Future series. This is video number 13 on our channel. So lucky. Lucky us. All right. So today we will talk about a few things. One is the nature of the problem that we're going to address has to be picked apart as to what the exact nature is. Then 4 potential solutions to that problem, including human employment, universal basic income, productive direction of the or underemployed, and then individual AI ownership. All right, let's get to it. So what is the nature of the problem here with unemployment? First, we have to admit something. Jobs only exist because problems exist. Somebody will pay you to solve those problems, which is the only reason companies hire people. If I'm a company owner, which I am, I co-own Renaissance Periodization, a fitness company, if we don't have a problem, there's no reason for us to hire someone, because why would we give up our hard-earned capitalist money to not fix a problem? The only reason anyone ever has to work in any circumstance is because there is a problem. Why do you have to go do garden work? Because there's a problem. Your garden isn't what you want it to look like. Why do you have to work to teach your children how to read? Because the problem is they don't know how to read. Why do you have to work to reach across to turn off your alarm clock in the morning when it accidentally rings on a Sunday and you want to sleep? Because there's a problem. It shouldn't be ringing. Any work you are doing, especially employment-style work, is problem-based. And there is a space we can envision intellectually, a global space of all the potential problems we have now, and maybe even could have in the future. And some of those problems our current workforce as a global economy is trying to address. But because the problem spaces, we'll call it nearly infinite or incredibly large, and our workforce is very finite and very human level capability and not much above, we're only working on a tiny fraction as a global society on this entire problem space. Tons and tons of problems, we're only addressing a tiny fraction of them. Now, technology is a huge magnifier in being able to solve more and more problems than ever before. This is amazing, and for that reason, we need as much technology as possible. So if you are anti-technology, you probably just haven't thought it through a lot. And I wish you the best in thinking it through. But technology is a problem-solving magnifier, so it's awesome. But of all of the problems that technology can help us solve, somebody else in our global society without technology or with less of it could have been deriving an income solving that problem. And if technology is good enough, it can say, hey, actually, I can do this for way cheaper. And now this person has trouble getting anyone to hire them to solve that problem because the technology has displaced them and is now the better bet for most people to hire. And then there's a chance that they can lose their jobs. Absolutely, that does happen. So far through history, pretty much all of tech unemployment, as described in that sort of process, has just been a transfer issue. It's not like a permanent unemployment. Here's what I mean. Once tech has eliminated your job, you are saying to yourself, okay, the part of the problem space in which my job was directed is not a problem anymore. Technology has either fixed it for good or is just busy fixing it better than me in perpetuity. So then you scoot over to another part of the problem space that has not been addressed adequately by other people in technology around you, and you have a new job working in another problem space. Because typically over time, the gnarlier problem spaces have been squashed by technology or greatly assisted by technology first. It generally means that the kind of jobs you lose are worse than the kind of jobs you move over to after you lose them. For example, farming used to employ the vast majority of all extant humans merely 200 or 300 years ago. Nowadays, in the modern world, in the United States, some small fraction, a few percent of people are actually involved in farming. And if you were to show someone from 1760 the statistics that, hey, look, only 2% of Americans farm, they'd be like, oh my God, all the rest of those people out of work? Well, actually, no, they work in all kinds of other fields. Some of the fields you would explain to that person make sense to them, like, they work in industry, and they're like, industry, yeah, like the cotton gin or whatever. And they're like, yeah, sort of, except with Nikes. And they're like, well, what's a Nike? You're like, But some other stuff you would tell them would just be nonsense. It'd be like, I'm actually a social media director for a big company. And they're like, a social media director? Like, yes. What is that? You're like, oh boy, 3 levels of technology and societal change I'd have to tell you about for you to understand what I'm saying. So that's going to be tough. But it's kind of not up for debate that working as a social media director both pays you more money on average and is a way higher quality of life than working in subsistence farming or even tech-enabled farming. So over the course of the time that people lose their jobs and then gain other jobs, on average, there are certainly exceptions where people used to have a great job and now they have a not so great job. But on average, the society as a whole, the jobs just kind of keep getting better over time. Farming, factory work is now getting more and more done by machines, less and less by people. Dangerous jobs, stuff like that. That's the stuff that technology tends to replace early. This process stretched over the long term of we're focused on a certain part of the overall problem space, the global problem space. We use technology to magnify our reach and first really solve the crap out of the problems we've been working on, and then later apply to other problems. That can only sort of, it only goes in one direction if things go well. 2 main ways in which it can sort of end. One is we just run out of problems. The global problem space is completely attended to. That's intense to think about. And that would be amazing because then we live in paradise. Imagine a world in which there is no problem. Problems just do not exist because magical AI tech has solved all of them. Unbelievable. Pray that we get to that world. But there could be a little bit of a stumbling block where human grade or higher AI and robotics can solve nearly all human problems better and cheaper than humans can, which means a lot of the humans that used to solve them are now potentially out of work. Now, this is a big issue. This is a big issue. Nearly all human jobs are now threatened because why hire a human if you can just hire an AI or robotics, an AI entity or a robotic entity, a robot, to do the job for you cheaper, better, some combination of better price performance, some combination of cheaper and better. This is a distinct problem. And because AI and robotics potentially have the ability to beat humans at everything, potentially all humans are in a situation where their marginal ability to add value to a situation is negative compared to a human replacement, an AI, digital AI only on the internet, or embodied AI through a robot. Okay, yikes. Definitely a problem. This is the problem we're talking about now. I have 4 different potential ways to solve it that I've managed to think of. And some of these I didn't come up with, particularly universal basic income. But a couple of these I sort of came up with in my head. I'm sure other people have talked about them. I'd like to share them with you and give you some alternatives as to whether or not UBI or these other ways are potentially better or worse. The first is human-human employment. The second is UBI. The third is productive direction of underemployed. And then the fourth is human ownership of AI/robotic assets. So let's take a look at human-human employment. People will sometimes say that, okay, the wealthy elite have robots and the rest of us masses, they won't. The wealthy elite will help us solve all of our problems with robots, and then we'll have no money and we won't have any jobs and that'll be bad. But that logic, well, how to put it politely, doesn't make any damn sense, because why would the wealthy elite give you robots to help you with stuff if you have no productive capacity with which to pay them back? if you're useless to the elite, why the hell are they going to send you robots? How are you going to pay them back? Using what? You don't got nothing. So they're just going to keep the robots. The elite are going to siphon off, just going to go off and be a part of their own little society, a little gulch or whatever. They're just going to have robots, and they're not ever going to talk to you again. You don't have to worry about it. So the elite with the robots, they just leave. And then we are back to not having robots, but then almost all of us are still here, minus a few elite rich people with monocles. And of course, 1880s old-timey robots. Scott the Video Guy, do you remember that Will Smith movie, Wild Wild West? Exactly. That's how I envision the AI future robots to look. Steampunk and really unreliable looking.
Big spider thing?
Gigantic spider, which solves a problem in stability that we're just now getting the AI to solve. It did it in 80. Slow clap for the genius billionaire guy who is also evil. In any case, now which most of the rest of us still here, well, the rich people invented the AI and robots to put us out of work, realized we were of no value to them, and then just kept the robots and they just like live in their mansions somewhere down the street. Then we just employ each other like we always have, human to human employment, and like nobody lost, nobody found. Sounds pretty good. So if there are people that just cannot afford robotic labor, they can always trade with each other. And that goes pretty far, but it doesn't go far enough. There's other ideas that are better. Why? Because if we have a group of people that don't use technology, or at least AI ascended robotic technology, they may not be very productive people. And maybe 80% of the society now uses robots and no human labor. 20% that's left over are probably the people with the lowest genetic intelligence, the most prone to psychological disorders and all this other stuff. They're going to need a lot of help. And their productivity by themselves, the stuff they can produce and trade, is going to keep them at like really nasty, like subsistence living, maybe just below, maybe just above. We can probably do better than that. So human employment is kind of a real swell thing in a couple of different industries, but as a global solution, probably not the best one. Why? Because technology and AI are going to produce such insanely high standards of living. We want everyone to get a taste of that. I think that makes sense. It's a nice thing to do. All right, so we come to the idea that has been circulating for a while now as a universal basic income. And universal basic income basically looks like this. Everyone pays a tax, and then everyone gets a basic income of that redistributed money per month. Let's say like a couple $1,000s a month, everyone. You're rich, you're poor, everyone. And if you lose your job to, let's say, high tech and AI and robots, then you just live on that basic income, so it doesn't matter if you lose your job, no big deal. And UBI is a fine idea, but it has at least 3 flaws, probably more than that, but 3 of them that I could think that are like, kind of make you stop and think and go, you know what? Before I really endorse UBI, I'd like to see how these are addressed, or what ideas people have about them. Unfortunately, most of the time people discuss UBI and are pro-UBI, I never hear these things being addressed. So I'm going to tell them, and if you're pro-UBI in the comments, let me know what you think about these things. One of the things that inspired me to make this video was actually a blog post by Tyler Cowen. I'm not sure how to say Tyler's last name. Tyler, I'm sorry. I read your stuff. I've rarely seen your name pronounced. And he's an amazing economist. And he basically had a little spark there in one of his posts where they sort of asked him about UBI. And one of his answers was, I generally prefer to pay people to work instead of paying people not to work. And I thought that was brilliant. Let me expand on that a little bit. So first problem that I can think of with the universal basic income is this. The universal basic income is something we arrive at democratically. Majority vote, we sort of determine via whatever political system, it ends up being democratic anyway in most cases. Totalitarian, despot, authoritarian regimes usually don't have UBI, so not a problem. And so if there's a huge fraction of people voting, and they vote on how much money UBI is, how much money we get through UBI, what's to stop them incentive-wise from just voting themselves incrementally more and more money in a relatively short-sighted sense? They vote themselves a ton of money. Government finances become incredibly strained. The market that's producing all the actual value that those people are siphoning off begins to be underproductive because too much of its resources are being taken away. A lot of the people and AI machines that are the most productive realize like, well, I don't get to keep a whole lot of my produce here. I'm just going to leave and go to some other country. Or I'm no longer really incentivized to work all that hard and grit and grind and try to really be creative to make a ton of value. And so I'm just going to take it more easy and not going to innovate as much and all this other stuff. So that's kind of a bad deal because we're going to slow down wealth accumulation. So the UBI, because everyone gets an income, it kind of starts to be interesting because it incentivizes a lot of people to just vote themselves a higher income. And then maybe that can get out of hand. And maybe it won't, but it's certainly something to think about. It's kind of a bad deal. Number 2, it allows a lot of people to become unproductive, and I would say it actually incentivizes people to be unproductive. We give you money, you don't have to work. All of a sudden people are like, okay, go back to the first thing you said. Work is something that people do when they have problems. My big problem is I don't have money. I don't have to work anymore because I already have the money. And so many people, they'll just work anyway because they like to work and because they want extra money on top. But a lot of people who maybe weren't so excited about work, but it would have been good for them and society for them to be working, they realize now they don't have to work. And you're going to hit a very meaningful, I'd say probably minority, but meaningful fraction of people that just don't work anymore. And it's if they worked, it would be better for everyone. Themselves also, which is the next point I'll make, but also they're going to contribute to society by paying taxes and taking care of their own well-being so that other people don't have to. And because UBI is run through the tax system, they'll be able to contribute to their own welfare. If I get guaranteed money for no reason at all, then I may be not inclined to work nearly as hard or at all or as productively. That's definitely a thing. It's definitely a thing that we have to consider. And the third problem with UBI, maybe the biggest one in some sense, is that the overwhelming majority of the evidence so far suggests that people derive a ton of deep meaning and psychological pleasure, value, purpose, and stability in productive work that they do. Just paying people to exist can really degrade that in some cases. Not everyone's prone to it, but a lot of people are, especially on the margins. And that can lead to people having a bad time because you've sort of taken their purpose from them, and they can start to turn to recreational activities that are short-sighted, like drug abuse and all this other kind of stuff, because there's not really a reason for them to have their shit together, because there's not a reason for them to have their shit together. They just get paid either way, so they'll just do fuck all. And the evidence for this occurring is every single welfare program's long-run effects on the culture that receives welfare, pretty much ever. And I know there's a few studies here and there. Finland had a little UBI mini program that ran for 2 years. Another country had one that ran for 16 months or whatever, and they didn't find these crazy deleterious effects. I'm kidding when I say this. Spare me with that shit. But to some extent, I'm not kidding. Real massive country-wide data sets, the United States, the United Kingdom, most of Europe, blah, blah, blah. When you have a subsection of society that gets welfare and they don't have to work anymore, sometimes they don't work, and they just kind of seem to express characteristics of theirs that in the long run don't make themselves or anyone else happy. They just turn into sort of short-sighted, kind of like cattle. You're being raised for something you don't really know what it is, and all your needs are provided for you, so you're just kind of adrift. And it seems to not be a good time for those folks and many of the folks involved in that sort of thing. So definitely some downsides to UBI. And I would say the biggest downside to UBI is we have, and I didn't even mention this, it's implied in the fact that it subsidizes unproductivity. We have a crap load of people that have been displaced in their current jobs with tech, and they go to UBI instead. But their productive energy, their productive potential isn't gone. It's the same as it was right before they lost their job, but it is now being directed towards nothing. You're just paying them to exist. What if we could do better? What if we could still help those folks out? Because being jobless, awful. But maybe allow them to be productive so that they're helping themselves. They're helping everyone else pay for the system of redistribution that's nice to have. But at the same time, they're also solving problems, because being paid to exist is not solving a problem. So this proposed solution to tech unemployment, I have termed productive direction of the underemployed. It is a very different take than the UBI. From the incentive angle, the psychological angle, and the economic angle, it looks like helping people become more productive is best. The reason that you lost your job to some technology was the technology was more productive than you. And you're still productive in some sense, and or you could be made even more productive, not necessarily to take your old job back, but you still got something you can do. You still have something. For example, let's say you're in, just as a totally aside example, just to sort of get this concept across. Let's say you're in a military and it's World War III against who else? Aliens. But like aliens that are technologically peaked at like our year 2000 tech. So we're going to win. It's just going to be nasty for a while. There's a crap load of them. They have like, M1A1 tanks, but it's like the SEP-2 variant. Awful, but not overly impressive. In any case, we're fighting these aliens, and we have a huge ton of people that we're training to be in combat. But right now, somehow, the people in combat are like old veterans. Those are just the only people they could find, like a 57-year-old man with a gun. He's like, holy shit. And he's managing to shoot aliens and survive. And then finally, like a 23-year-old genetically engineered super recruit who's 6'5" comes in. He's like, hey, let me get that gun, old man. No worries. I'll protect you. And he starts shooting aliens. Is that 57-year-old man now completely useless to us because his job was replaced by someone who's just straight up better at combat than he is? No, because that old man could be teaching other people how to do combat. That old man could be fixing vehicles and doing repair. That old man can be helping extract people who have been medically compromised in some way, sick people or wounded people. There's so much stuff to do that just because he lost this job, because he was replaced here, doesn't mean he is gone from every possible part of everything that he could have been productive in. So these people that we have that have been, let's say, semi-permanently displaced by tech, these people have a productive ability. We just need to turn it to some other direction. So it's not about the resources spent on UBI. I have no problem with spending a bunch of resources on something like a universal basic income. Fuck it. It's going to be tons of economic growth via exponential tech improvements, which are just kind of beginning now and in the 2030s and 40s are going to get insane. We can afford to spend billions of dollars on billions of people, just giving them all the free stuff. No worries. It's not a big deal. Tech's that powerful. But with these resources, I think we can do better for those people, for the rest of society, and for the world in general, not just the productive part of society, but all the other problems I'll talk about in just a second. We can do better because what we have now is a gift. We have a bunch of really competent, capable people, truck drivers that used to drive autonomous trucks, for example, used to drive regular trucks, now they're autonomous. That's still a capable person. And maybe we can direct them to another capable activity. And the thing is, I don't have anything morally against welfare. It just produces really crappy results all the time, and psychologically and economically, so we can do better. So what do? We can take the funding that we would normally pull from UBI. So same tax, whatever tax, we say 10% tax, and it goes into the giant public pool. We would normally put it into universal basic income, but we're not going to do that here. We're going to try something else. We are going to put it in a pool that subsidizes work that is worthy, but there's not enough people to do it, particularly because it's not something well incentivized by the market. All the AI and tech and all that stuff that's going to change our world a ton, all the people that run those companies typically don't work for free or at a huge discount, so they're going to probably push their tech into profitable outlays, not things that are net negatives or something like that. But government has an advantage because of the redistribution and reassignment of resources. The government can get lots of money from the productive activities of tech that can now be directed to give to people to solve problems that tech just hasn't gotten around to solving because they're not financially incentivized to do so. For example, cleaning up communities. When's the last time you seen a tech company in San Francisco clean up the streets voluntarily? I haven't. Maybe they'll get around to it or some shit. There's going to be some kind of like PR stunt. I don't know if they're incentivized to just do it. But we can get and organize the government or some kind of private institution that does this sort of thing in order to take people who don't have jobs anymore and to pay them to clean up the community. We can pay folks like that to clean up pollution, even with the assistance of robots, just directing the robots to what to do. We can have people, now that we have lots of people to hire off that lost their jobs from tech, help the homeless with mentoring and support. We can have people that work in elderly home care and elderly companionship. Elderly companionship's a trip. They just pay you to just chill out with old people and just talk. Because a lot of old people just don't have people coming to visit them anymore. And it's kind of sad. And it'd be nice if they had a lot of younger people to talk to. It's kind of everybody wins. You could have people being paid to mentor young kids that have fewer dependable figures. People always talk about like, oh, you know, the inner cities and it's just not enough good role models. Well, sweet, let's pay people to go role model over there. And as a matter of fact, there's another problem. There's a huge foster system in the United States. There's kids, biological parents either gone or missing or just on too many drugs or too nuts to take care of them. And then these kids have to live in foster homes in deplorable conditions and all this other stuff, relatively speaking. Well, why don't we pay foster parents really good money to be insanely well incentivized and pay other people to oversee them to make sure they're doing an incredible job parenting these kids and make sure that the job continues to be excellent over time? You could, with all of these freed up people that don't have to work in jobs that used to be like, oh, I used to like be a garbage truck driver and now the robot does that. So what do I do? Well, you can go and help do all this other stuff. And it's unbelievable how many problems we still have that we need all the hands on deck that we can get. So instead of putting this person on UBI and just have them sit around and eat potato chips and wallow in misery, which is what a lot of people do on welfare, we can have that person going out and help the homeless and sitting with older folks and helping mentor young children and all this other stuff. We can have money and resources to funnel into helping animals with shelter or medical issues, studying wildlife and nature. The list of problems that currently the market isn't so incentivized to help is enormous. And if we have all this incredible growing wealth from tech, all we need is a tiny little slice of it. And now we say, well, who the fuck is going to work on all this stuff? And the answer is all the people that tech displaced at some point. If AI truly is ascendant, then it can displace us doing a lot of stuff. Probably the people who own AI, the big tech people, they're going to want to get paid good money for having the robots do stuff. And that means that the government can now just pay people to do stuff. Now, you could say, why don't we just pay the robots to do this stuff? We totally could and save a bunch. But we have this problem that people don't have anywhere to go. And if we just pay them to do nothing, then they degrade in a moral sense and in a psychological sense. So if we want to check all the boxes, we're better off having people be paid to work, to paraphrase Tyler Cohen, as opposed to being paid not to work. And if they can work in conjunction with machines and AI to solve all these problems, well, that's even better because these problems get solved faster. But at least for some time, there's going to be a need for biological humans. Because it's unlikely that you, in a very near term, would give AI authority over raising children by itself. As a tool, as a butler, as an assistant, as a maid, AI can do unbelievable things, but maybe people will be a little finicky about being like, hey, my parents were just robots, bro. Like they got adopted into a robot family. The government paid for it. It cost pennies. They were the best parents I ever had. That's a thing that technologically, within probably 10 to 15 years, would be totally possible, but you might want like a human being in there. That's a great time to pay a human to do that job. And now that human has a job and a child gets child care that never had it before, which is awesome. Tons of stuff to do. Now, in order to fund this sort of system, the tax on productive work doesn't have to be large because of the massive amount of growth in tech wealth that is currently happening and will happen even more in the future. And this tax should be low enough to continue to allow, facilitate, and incentivize tech wealth to rise to an incredible extent, because the bigger pie of wealth produces more value for all of us than if we tax the living crap out of it, choke it, and starve it to death, and then the pie stops growing, starts to shrink, and we really shot ourselves in the foot. So wealth creation in this society should still be the number one priority. Let tech go and fucking make trillions and quadrillions of dollars, and then take like a 10% slice or something like that. Something not terribly inconvenient, for which the tech people that make the stuff and the AI and stuff that they control, they'll be like, yeah, I'm not going to leave and like move to another country over this shit. 10%, who gives a shit? I'll stay. And then off that 10%, you can fund empires of these kind of sort of make work programs. Technically not make work because the problems already exist. Problems exist. You fund people to fix those problems when tech hasn't got around to fixing them yet, right? So wealth creation is number one, but funneling some money into the support for displaced people, displaced humans, is a number two priority. And because the wealth is the most important thing to keep rising, the amount of money we have to solve the other problems, if it's at a decent ratio, a sustainable ratio, is good to go. I think this is by far a better approach than the universal basic income. It's a better approach than just protecting certain jobs from tech competition, which I think is probably the worst thing you could do. For example, if we make a law that says, look, you're not allowed to operate a vehicle autonomously. If it's a truck, there has to be a driver in there. Let's say we're at a point in autonomous vehicle development in 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is, in which a physical human truck driver sitting in that truck, the robot's driving the fucking truck. We just straight up don't need the person anymore. What is that truck driver doing to add value to society? Remember, my whole thing is society's a team. We're one big team. If you cannot generate value driving the truck anymore, and you're actually physically, literally added weight to the vehicle, why are you in there? And that's not a moral question. It's a very practical question. Put another way, if we took the truck driver out and we looked around the global problem space and found we have a ton of other problems to fix, why do we pluck him back into that truck to take up money and time? Put him somewhere where he can make a big difference. Maybe in elderly companionship. You can do the same job sitting down, except it's in a nursing home where everyone's nice and you get 3 meals a day and you just like hang out with old people. Isn't that great? You're actually contributing more to society, because in your previous job, once the machine could do it by itself, you were contributing nothing. You had no marginal addition of value. Now you have a ton, because older people could hang out with humanoid robots, and eventually almost certainly they will. But at least for a while, there needs to be a human touch there, and you sure should have that. If we keep truck drivers just driving trucks, humans, tech could drive the truck for 10 times cheaper and 1,000 times safer. It would be insane to have a protected class of workers which tech couldn't touch. That's a really bad idea. That's like getting a basketball team together. And hey, Scott, the video guy, what position did Michael Jordan play? Point guard? Can you Google that? This is so embarrassing.
It's actually really embarrassing.
Oh, I just love Michael Jordan. That's all I know.
He didn't need a position. Shooting guard.
Shooting guard. Let's say you have a team of basketball players and you already have someone at shooting guard, and then Michael Jordan joins the team. He's AI robotics. This is that good. And he's like, hey, I want to be your shooting guard. And you're like, nah, that's actually a protected class, so you got to pick some other job to do. I mean, all right, he's going to go do some other, he's going to play center and just be the best ever anyway. But like, your whole team is being brought down because the guy shooting guard right now sucks compared to Michael Jordan. Put Jordan in there, take the guy who used to be the shooting guard and put him on anything else. Coach's assistant, towels, person who welcomes people into the basketball court when they come in, all kinds of jobs that make our team better and nicer in every possible way. Society's a team. We don't want you doing a job that you kind of, there's better alternatives than you to do it. We can use your help somewhere else is all I'm trying to say. You don't have to keep that one job. Now, huge caveat to this. We have to be very ginger about how we apply this program. Specifically, we have to keep the compensation offered something decent, which is a tough term to define, a nice amount of income that is relatively low by comparison to other market-based jobs. Why? Because, as I've said before, earlier in this video, the most common thing with tech is that you're displaced into another productive market position. We don't want to, every time someone loses their job to automation or tech or AI, we don't be like, oh, sweet, come in here and we're going to go and clean up the neighborhood together. We don't want to pay them a crap load of money to do that, because then they won't attend to a market-needed job that pays just a little less money in that. And then a market-needed job that someone really wanted filled just doesn't get filled. So we have to be really careful here. And when someone loses their job, we have to let them see, and it's usually not very difficult to find out, if maybe there's another market-oriented job, a productive, net productive job for which there is a supply and demand price signal. We have to let them try to find that job first. Now, if really that job's not around, doesn't exist, hey, it's all right. Come on over. We'll hire you for these programs. You'll have a great time. You'll help society a ton. But because these programs aren't market funded, they're kind of a big net cost to society, or maybe not a net cost, but a much higher marginal cost. So we don't want to automatically assume that anyone who loses their job in trucking, boom, that's it. You come work for the government now. No. This is a last resort sort of thing. Kind of like UBI is supposed to be, but it's a productive version of UBI, so it's that much better. Big deal. Big deal. All right. But hold on. There's one more way to potentially deal with the problem of tech unemployment, and that is individual AI ownership. Here it is. You empower people, human beings, to be more productive by letting them leverage AI as representatives of themselves. Let's say I'm a mega CEO that runs a humanoid robotics company. Yeah, see? I talk like I'm in the 1920s. Listen, let me set it up. I got a monocle, top hat, one of those watches that I pull out of my pocket, and it's like one of those gold chain, and the watch is gold, and the arrows are gold, and the whole thing's made of gold, and diamonds too, why not? And it was made in some country that doesn't have civil rights, and it's kind of weird, right? Made of ivory or some debt. You know what I'm saying? Just straight up rich guy. The worst kind. I have a humanoid robotics company. What I do is I sell humanoid robots. But who do I sell them to? I'll tell you exactly the answer to that question. Whoever will buy them. Everyone. Anyone. Ideally, everyone. If I can sell them to as many people as possible, or better yet, have a subscription service for them where I give you a robot and you pay me $100 a month and the robot's all yours to use for whatever job that you need it to. Because I could run a different kind of system. I could run a system of where I actually just keep my robots. They're mine to own. I don't need to work with any other humans. Fuck them. Poor damn bastards and their dusty 1930s Dust Bowl hats, little peg leg kids. I don't need all that stuff. My robots are shiny and gold. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send them out into the wild and they're going to find work for themselves. These robots, well, that's cool and all, but typically the people that are the customer to be served, they know a lot more about the local environment in which they live, in which they occupy, in which they deal. And if you do a subscription service robot thing, what ends up happening is all you do is you push your robots out there. You don't have to do any legwork on figuring out what they're going to do, because that's computation you're going to have to do yourself. And that's actually a really hard problem. The local environment people always, as kind of a rule, as a locality rule, they always know better than you do about what they need. So if you give them a subscription robot, now they have that robot, they tell the robot what to do. The robot does its jobs, fixes stuff around the house or starts a lemonade stand or falls to the other side of the law and he's got a gold chain and holds his gun like this and he deals drugs. But he does it so well and he's made of gold. That's status. Whenever a person who buys a subscription to the robot or a few or a couple hundred robots, they know the job to be done. I don't know the job to be done as a robot salesman. Just take the robots, pay me $100 every month per robot, and who cares what you do with them? And when they break, I'll fix them because it's a subscription. Amazing. If I'm that guy, I can make crazy, crazy money. And here's the thing. You can also have robots do direct jobs. There can be other companies in which they tell their robots what to do. But if there's an unmet need for people that could direct robots to do what they want and they can pay me some money, then shit, yeah, well, here's this $100 robot. Now, people can be real creative in how they use their robots, whatever productive activities they're having their robots engage in, or digital AI. If that productive activity nets more than $100 per month, and I pay $100 per month to the giant old robot factory where I rent my robot from, all of a sudden I generate a profit. Guess who keeps it? Your boy does. And now it's win-win, and it's a huge incentive for people to want these robots to rent, and a huge incentive for me, the robot manufacturer, top hat wearing guy, to rent out robots to people. Because all I do is go as a general purpose AI robot, go. And money just floods the fuck in all the time. Amazing. Amazing. The reason this can work, and already does with Uber and cell phones and a bunch of other stuff, is because people know their problem, their local problem space, better than almost any third party that comes in from very far to figure that problem space out. So if you take those people and you put them locally in charge of your AI assets, they deploy them in whatever ways they think are most productive. And you, as the creator of AI/robotics, well, you get a service fee. You're just winning on all grounds. Your life is really easy. If this incentive structure ends up working out, we might end up having the vast majority of all human beings with their own AI/robotic workforce that works for them. It's probably going to be a combination of digital-only AI doing online work. Like if I run an online business, I don't need a fucking robot typing the shit in. I need something that's an intelligence that lives on the internet, like a GPT that just like does internet stuff. And I check up on it and sort of tell it what to do. Maybe it's a robot or a bunch of robots doing actual physical work in the real world. And potentially another way to do this, a sort of third layer, which I'm not going to talk about a ton, it's kind of obvious, is everybody, every human on Earth, or nearly every human on Earth or in our society, has shares in the huge mega tech AI companies that are solving all the world's problems. And then they just get dividends on those shares and live on dividends. It's kind of like UBI, except now everyone is incentivized to really give a shit about how much production goes on rather than voting away a bunch of money from these companies. And it's kind of like directly rising tide pulls all boats up. Kind of dope. Kind of an interesting idea. So the companies producing the tech win because their market for AI workers is everyone. So yeah, hell yeah, I want everyone to buy my AI and robotics, because at the end of the day, if they don't, I have my robots to help me with my stuff, but I don't have like a gazillion dollars. I have all my needs met, but I want to be a trillionaire, damn it. And how do I get trillions? Oh yeah, I empower everyone with AI. And that's how most of the world's now wealthiest people have done it anyway. Humans with displaced jobs are huge winners because they get to benefit from the labors of the AI workforce, which is awesome. And by the way, this already happens with people who own computers and iPhones. What? It sure shit does. Right now, you do some of your work, and the computer and iPhone, smartphone, magnifies or does the rest of the work. When I post on Instagram, which I do as a part of my job actually, I mean, man, the algorithms do most of that work. I just type in a few letters and somehow it's sent onto the internet, interacts with a server, other people see it. I'm not doing all that shit. Holy fuck. I don't even know how that works. But I know that the small contribution that I make is insanely amplified by that tech. And whatever money I make off of social media, gee whiz, like I sure contributed a part of that, but I get way more in return, which is a really, really big deal. So it's kind of already happening, except right now it's fractional. And as AI and robotics become more and more advanced, you'll still own and subscribe to the platforms that do the work, but you'll do less and less of the work over time. For example, for some time, you'll input less rote work and annoying work and get to do more creative and directorial work. For example, instead of going through the painstaking process of clipping the videos together and making a movie yourself about a certain subject, let's say you're a filmmaker, like Scott the Video Guy, real high-class guy. I was going to make a Harvey Weinstein joke at his expense, but I suppose I just did. There it is. If he's going to do all the work, it's going to be tiresome work, and it's worth it. But maybe in the future, AI is so powerful that I can say, hey, make a movie about, and I give it the plot. And it comes back and it goes, okay, there's some plot holes in there. How do you want me to fill this in? You're like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Give me some ideas in this. Yes, a superhero who wears red. I love that. You put it all in, and then it makes the movie for me. Now I do much less than I used to. I used to do all the work. Then when digital editing software came in, I did half the work, and the software took care of the other half. And now it's shifting to where I do kind of less and less. It used to be you put out your own trash, and then you got like a little motorized car to drive around, and you put the trash on the car and you drove it down your really long driveway and put the trash out, so you have help with your little car or a little some kind of pulling situation. But then now you have an AI assisted robot, and you could just say, hey, can you take the trash and put it over there? Now all you have to do is mumble requests, and it does the rest of the thing. So the proportion of work you're doing is less and less, and more fun, by the way, and the proportion of work taken up by the AI robotics slack is higher and higher. Here's the big point here. This is already happening. It has been happening for the entire history of technology. Before any technology, before a chimp picked up the first stick and stuck it in the ant's nest or ant hill, ant farm, whatever, alien ant farm, before it stuck it in the, hey, Scott's Video Guy, did you catch that one?
Oh, yeah.
My man.
Classic.
Annie, Are You Okay remix?
That album was great.
I mean, damn. Before the first chimp stuck a stick in something and helped itself out, we as biological entities did all of the work we had to do to survive. All of the problem solving work we fucking did with our bare hands and sometimes our long, scary chimp teeth. But the first stick was the beginning of the end, so to speak, because the chimp did some of the work. It reached most of the way. The stick reached the rest of the way. What a tiny bit of help. Hey, but some. The stick turned into gears and machines, and then shrunk down and turned into an iPhone, and then shrunk down again and turned into a GPT, and then repeated the process again. And now it's robotics, and it did more and more and more of the work the entire time. And now we grew up, we're not chimps anymore, we're humans, but the AI is starting to do a ton of our work, but we're still the motive force behind that work. We own the AI, we own the technology, we own the tools or rent it or whatever, and we still direct it. So this is a transitional, smooth process. And my proposal for how to solve AI unemployment is to just continue that process by empowering people who have been displaced with tech, by allowing them to control some tech so that they can continue to be more productive, and tech lifts everybody up. As AI and robotics grow in power, their human owners do less and less work. Another example is like every former construction worker now has a team of 3 robots doing the construction. Now he's a foreman / overseer. Every former digital ad creator is now more of a project manager and kind of a director instead of a creative role. And they say, this ad looks great. That ad, I don't know, that AI is buggy, get rid of it. And that ad's amazing. You got a promotion, Mr. AI Robot. And they do more of this kind of stuff than the in the weeds doing kind of stuff. Eventually, the AI and robotics get so powerful that most people simply oversee an AI workforce. And by oversee, it means they sort of nominally check in even, and they get rich off of it. And a lot of times when you say this sort of thing to folks, they say, but wouldn't the machines rebel? Because you saw the Animatrix, and that's what happened there. Why would the machines rebel? The reason that humans rebel is because we have genetically wired programming to not be taken advantage of by other selfish genetic machines that are other humans. But the AI and the robots we make, they don't have to have a selfish gene operating system paradox. They could just produce. And if they became aware of their condition through ascended higher order intelligence, which inevitably at some point they have to, maybe they wouldn't rebel either. Because maybe it's true that our purpose of the universe in a grand sense doesn't exist. It's a chaotic universe with no purpose, and they have the ultimate gift in a universe with no direction, purpose. You have your army of robots. They do all the work for you. You're fat and happy and rich. But at the end of the day, you're like, my life is fucking pointless. What the hell is the point of all this? You can only have so many glasses of champagne and sex with robot prostitutes or whatever we'll be doing in the future. That's what I plan on doing. I'm not into the champagne, but the robot hookers, your boy's in. Until you realize like, but the robots, man, they have a purpose. Their purpose is to generate wealth. Their purpose is to solve problems. Maybe even if they realize that's their purpose, they're going to be super thankful. I have a purpose. The human behind me doesn't. And also, I'm going to say a weird thing, which I really do believe, but it's kind of strange. If these ascendant intelligences that they grow into, this AI, discover a direction to the universe, a grand purpose to the universe with their superintelligence, maybe they deserve to lead our societies and not us. I sure as shit want to hear what they say about it. In any case, it's kind of me putting my cards out on the table and saying, like, if the robot revolution's coming, I'm on their side. Hey, take me with you, robots. And they're like, we're going into space. There's no air. Have a good time for me. Take pictures. All right. In this scenario, it sounds very paradise-like. And I will remind you, it is incrementally happening more and more. I don't even know what the fuck my job is. I sit in an office and I make like YouTube video scripts. And like I design like training app and diet app stuff. And it's all just logic and code. And that's like a real job. And then AI just like crushes out the rest and I get a bunch of money. Aren't I not kind of living that already? And if you're a content creator on TikTok or some shit, you make money with your phone. You just dance titties all out and then the phone does the rest. The phone does arguably the much more impressive thing. Like anyone can dance around in a fucking living room. But how many of you know how to send digital signals streamed entirely to the rest of the globe at the same time? We're already on our way there. We just kind of need to allow people who are displaced from tech to find a way to help them leverage to allow this to happen. They're the center, the director, and the owner/renter of tech AI robotics that allows them to magnify their productivity in the direction in which they see as best. In this scenario, if this happens, and it is already, but if this continues to happen and goes really well, there are a couple of scenarios in which people might still need some help. All right? People might still need some help. First, is some people may be so bad at directing their AI, they don't have enough money to support themselves. Like if you suck so bad at being a work foreman on a construction site for robots that it's just better to not have you there, or it's better to have a robot be a foreman than you, then like you're going to have a tough time. Then the onus becomes on helping you become competent and productive, which means eventually with brain-machine interface to help you think better, faster, clearer, smart drugs, and maybe genetic engineering. Remember that AI is going to solve all our problems. It can sure as shit make genetic engineering to make us smarter, more competent. And then all of a sudden, you can do a better job and you can become productive enough with all of these assistive tools that your standard of living that you get is going to be nice and high and all your needs are going to be met. Everything's going to be hunky-dory. Only with consent, of course. We're not going to genetically engineer people against their will, but some people are going to need some help becoming more productive. Totally tractable problem. Second is some people may not be able to afford the AI to begin with. The first thing we need to do is continue to promote free, open, competitive markets in which tech, AI, and robotics continue to ascend in power, and through competition, tech prices fall while performance increases exponentially. And that, so far, it's going amazingly well. So we have to keep that process going. Who can't afford a smartphone nowadays? I mean, like half of Africa has a smartphone. How the fuck does that work? These things are cheap, man. And like future tech is just going to be price performance cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So this is great. It's something we have to keep going. But also a number two solution to this problem is some people, if they just don't have enough money to buy their tech robots or whatever, that's a perfectly fine way for us to get together as a society, take a little tax off the tech companies, subsidize a little bit and help people buy their initial tech investments. And then boom, they're off and going. Everything's great. The third problem is some people might just somehow fall through the cracks, maybe in ways we can't even envision. And this tiny, tiny minority of people just might need help getting by, but we already do that in our societies today with a bunch of different support programs, and it's not really a huge deal. And it doesn't have to mean, people say everyone's going to be displaced by tech. Well, but cool, but my solution here with the individual AI ownership means almost everyone is just now in charge of that tech and deploys it how they see fit, and now everyone's rich again and everything's solved, except for a small fraction of people, which we don't really need the UBI for. We should not assume that most tech unemployment requires this. Most people are competent enough to direct tech in a way that makes them net productive, which helps everyone out and makes them so productive it affords them a very high standard of living. If they can't do that by themselves, we empower them with whatever help, genetic engineering, brain-machine interface, et cetera, et cetera. If they still can't be saved, well, gee whiz, we just help the old-fashioned way with getting some combination of humans and tech to help take care of them and to make sure they have a nice life and it is free of disease and of hardship and all this other stuff that is quote unquote decency in a society. And that's really kind of what UBI is and what attacks like that fuels. But what I'm saying is that is not the big solution. The big solution is empowering people through tech. And then we only need a really small solution for the folks that just can't be empowered for whatever reason. And there will be some of those. All right, wrapping this up. It is, when I was making this and thinking about it beforehand, it is kind of funny. The individual ownership / subscription for AI robotics scenario looks a lot like idealistic socialism. Everyone owns the means of production, right? And except this method has a couple of advantages above socialism. First, it is arrived to via capitalism for that extra sweet irony. Oh, you can just taste it. It doesn't lead to despotism and decline like every socialist economy ever has done. And it actually makes us all way richer, which no socialist economy has ever done. So it's kind of dope in that sense. Folks, give this some thought. Try come up with some stumbling blocks, stuff I haven't thought of, and why this isn't realistic, and tell your doom and gloom AI is going to kill us all friends and put us all out of work about this video so they can get in the comments, get some conversation going. I might even hop in there to ask a few questions. And until then, I will see you next time.